In the tapestry of 20th century Africa, few threads are as complex or as tightly wound as the life of Robert Gabriel Mugabe. To some, he remains the intellectual hero, the unwavering voice who dared to defy the world's most powerful nations and reclaim the dignity of his people. To others, he is the embodiment of a revolution that lost its way, a leader whose actions led a once thriving nation to the brink of ruin. Who was this man, truly? Was he a liberator who served his people, or a man whose grip on power became his ultimate priority? This is not a story with simple answers. This is a story of a life lived in the shadow of that question. Robert Mugabe's story begins on February 21st, 1924, in the heart of colonial southern Rhodesia. He was a product of his time, and of a place defined by racial division. The world he was born into was a place where a white minority of just over 200,000 people held political, economic, and social control over a Black African population of more than 4 million. Raised by a devout Catholic mother in the absence of his father, the young Robert found solace and purpose in education, which was his only viable path to self-improvement. The Jesuit-run Kutama Mission School became his world, instilling in him a sense of discipline and intellectual rigor that would remain with him for life. He was a brilliant student who defied the odds, earning a Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of Fort Hare in South Africa. This was just the beginning. Over the next 2 decades, he would accumulate an astounding number of degrees, including a Bachelor of Administration, a Bachelor of Education, and a Bachelor of Laws, often studying through correspondence courses while working as a teacher in Ghana. The sheer intellectual drive was undeniable, making him one of the most highly educated presidents in the world. But what kind of man emerges from such an intense, singular focus on learning in a society that so actively seeks to deny you that very opportunity? Did his relentless pursuit of knowledge come from a place of genuine curiosity, or was it a weapon forged in the fires of colonial oppression? The world around him was one of systemic injustice. White minority rule held a monopoly on land, wealth, and political power. These deep-seated inequalities, the daily humiliations of life under colonial law, were the silent teachers that shaped his political ideology. He would go on to join the nationalist movement, becoming a leading figure in the Zimbabwe African National Union, or ZANU. His intellectualism, his clear and powerful command of language, made him a compelling and fearsome opponent of the regime. The man who had been a quiet scholar was now a revolutionary. In 1964, Mugabe's activism led to his imprisonment, a period that would fundamentally transform him. He spent over a decade in detention, a crucible that hardened his resolve and refined his political strategy. It was a period of intense intellectual and emotional isolation. It was during this time that he was denied permission to attend the funeral of his 4-year-old son, Namazenika, who died of malaria. It is a moment many historians and analysts point to as a turning point, suggesting it contributed to the uncompromising nature and lack of personal emotion that would later define his rule.
Well, the Americans and the British are responsible for this conference. They are the people who convened it. And if their hope was that we were going to dance within the Kissinger plan, then I can understand their disappointment. We are going to intensify the struggle. We have never promised anyone that the war was going to stop.
Following his release, Mugabe took command of ZANU's armed wing, leading the guerrilla forces to victory. After years of brutal conflict, the Lancaster House Agreement of 1979 paved the way for Zimbabwe's independence.
In its place, the new Zimbabwean flag rises.
In 1980, the man who had been a political prisoner was elected the first prime minister of a new nation. In his initial speeches, Mugabe presented a vision of unity and forgiveness, surprising many who had feared a vengeful leader. He spoke of turning swords into plowshares, of building a new society where black and white could live together as Zimbabweans. He extended an olive branch to his former enemies, promising no victimization. It was a remarkable moment, a testament to his intelligence and political astuteness. Was this a genuine call for reconciliation, or a pragmatic move to secure his grip on a fragile new state?
I have no feeling of animosity or hostility. What we fought against and resisted all along the way was the political order here based on racialism, which was completely undemocratic, and we fought a system and therefore not individual.
In the years that followed, Zimbabwe experienced a period of remarkable growth. The new government invested heavily in education and healthcare, leading to soaring literacy rates and improved life expectancy. To many, Zimbabwe was a success story, a shining example of a post-colonial nation thriving under a visionary leader. What are your thoughts on Mugabe's early life and vision? Let us know in the comments below. And if you're enjoying this deep dive into his history, please remember to like and subscribe for more. The era of peace was short-lived. A deep and bloody political rift emerged between Mugabe's ZANU party, dominated by the Shona ethnic group, and Joshua Nkomo's ZAPU party, largely supported by the Ndebele. The Gukurahundi, meaning the early rain which washes away the chaff before the spring rains, in the Shona language, was a brutal military campaign between 1983 and 1987. Mugabe's North Korean-trained 5th Brigade was deployed to Matabeleland and the Midlands, ostensibly to crush a dissident threat. The campaign, however, became a systematic massacre of thousands of civilians. Human rights groups estimate that up to 20,000 Ndebele people were killed. Mugabe's government maintained these were necessary security operations to maintain stability. But was this a tragic but necessary measure to ensure national stability? Or was it an act that has been widely condemned as a political and human rights tragedy?
When Joshua Nkomo says that the answer to the dissident problem is a political settlement, what do you say to that?
Well, this is precisely what he wants, that we should settle the question of the elections and the balance of power because of pressure from dissident activity. Now we won't yield to that. Who is Nkomo? You see, and what is up after all? You see, the dissident activity will eliminate, I can assure you. We have treated...
As time went on, the promise of reconciliation began to fray. Allegations of corruption and the suppression of political rivals became more common. Mugabe began to consolidate power, changing the constitution to create an executive presidency and centralizing his authority. The image of the peaceful leader gave way to a more concentrated style of leadership. What had caused this transformation? Was it the natural evolution of a leader trying to hold a fragmented nation together? Or a shift in his political approach, fueled by a deep-seated desire to remain in power at all costs? While his public life was defined by the relentless pursuit of power, Mugabe's personal life was also marked by deep tragedy and profound loss. The death of his young son while he was in prison was a wound that many believe never truly healed. But for decades, his political life was tempered by the presence of his first wife, Sally Hayfron Mugabe. Sally was more than just a wife. She was a partner, a fellow teacher and activist, and a stabilizing presence. She was widely respected and loved by Zimbabweans, who affectionately called her Amai, or Mother of the Nation. Her measured influence and role as a moral compass are often cited as a key factor in Mugabe's initial, more moderate years. But in 1992, Sally Mugabe died from kidney failure. Her death was a devastating blow to Mugabe. The loss of this trusted confidant and widely respected figure left a void, both in his personal life and in the political landscape of Zimbabwe. Could the absence of this moderating voice have played a role in the changes that would follow? Was it possible that with Sally gone, the more uncompromising and ruthless sides of his nature were allowed to emerge unchecked? The years that followed Sally's death were marked by a shift in Mugabe's personal and political life. He would later marry his former secretary, Grace Marufu, a controversial figure who would eventually be nicknamed Gucci Grace, and whose political ambitions would set the stage for the dramatic end of his rule. By the late 1990s, the battle lines were drawn. Faced with a burgeoning political opposition at home and a growing international campaign against him, Mugabe turned his attention to a long-standing grievance, the issue of land. Under the willing seller, willing buyer terms of the Lancaster House Agreement, land reform had been agonizingly slow. Mugabe saw this as a failure to rectify a core injustice of the colonial era, where a small white minority controlled the vast majority of the country's most fertile land. In a radical move, he launched the Fast-Track Land Reform Program, seizing thousands of white-owned farms for redistribution to landless Black Zimbabweans. The move was met with fierce condemnation from Western nations, who saw it as a violation of property rights and a threat to regional stability. To many in Africa and the developing world, however, Mugabe was a hero, standing up to neo-colonial powers. His rhetoric became more confrontational, his speeches more defiant and pointed.
Land must change hands in favor of the majority of our people. After all, the land is ours by birth. It's ours by right. It's ours also by struggle.
The war of words became as intense as the economic fallout. Mugabe was unapologetically fearless in his condemnation of Western leaders. In a famous speech at the 2002 Earth Summit in Johannesburg, he took direct aim at the British Prime Minister, Tony Blair, who was pushing for sanctions against Zimbabwe. He looked out at the assembled world leaders, and with a mix of wit and defiance, he delivered a line that would forever define his stance on the international stage.
We don't mind having and bearing sanctions banning us from Europe. We are not Europeans. We have not asked for any inch of Europe or any square inch of that territory. So, Blair, keep your England and let me keep my Zimbabwe.
Later, at another summit, when asked about British interference in Zimbabwe's affairs, he would deliver another memorable jab, a line that demonstrated his biting, often darkly humorous rhetorical style.
And then put those with the white faces and pink noses, put them together against us. How many are they, even man to a man? Do we allow that group should continue to harass us even in our independent countries? Regime change, Mugabe should not be there. We want someone else coming from Europe. Tell them to shut their mouths.
But the consequences of this defiance were dire. The land reform, carried out with violence and without a clear plan, crippled the agricultural sector. The West imposed sanctions, which Mugabe blamed for the ensuing economic crisis. Zimbabwe spiraled into hyperinflation, food shortages, and mass unemployment. Was this an act of courageous defiance that the world punished unjustly, or a policy with severe and damaging consequences for the welfare of his people? What do you believe is Mugabe's most defining legacy? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And please like and subscribe for more content. In November 2017, after 37 years in power, the man who had fought to liberate his country was removed from power not by a popular uprising, but by his own military and the machinations of his former allies. The catalyst was his decision to sack his vice president, Emmerson Mnangagwa, to clear the way for his wife, Grace, to succeed him. It was a stunning end to an era. Robert Mugabe died in 2019 at the age of 95. His life was a journey from colonial subject to liberation hero, from celebrated statesman to international pariah. His legacy is still fiercely debated, a source of pride for some and a painful reminder for others. Was he the embodiment of African liberation, a man who gave his people independence and a voice on the world stage? Or was he a leader who, over time, diverged from the principles he initially championed, leading his nation into a dark and uncertain future? Perhaps the truth is that he was both, a figure forever caught between the promise of a revolution and the reality of power. The question of whether he was a hero or a tyrant is one that Zimbabwe and the world must continue to answer for themselves.